can be really difficult for teachers to pick up children with language impairment in a whole class full of children. And every child with a language impairment has slightly different difficulties and strengths within language, but there are signs to look out for, and it's important that teachers are tuned into these. A teacher may spot some difficulties or behaviours that could indicate a language difficulty. So, for example, a child may have difficulties at break negotiating with their peers, or maybe understanding the rules of a game. In the classroom, a teacher may feel that the child is forgetful or perhaps a poor listener because they don't seem to be listening to the instructions or carrying out the instructions that they've been given.
Those children who have trouble getting down to their work might be an indication that the language is a problem for them. There are those children who avoid work, sit there staring into space, not finishing the task, perhaps because the language is too difficult for them. And then there are those children who are always looking around the room, copying what the others are doing to make sure that they are on track, and also copy beautifully but don't produce the written work on their own that you might expect them to do.
If a teacher notices a child is blank with some questions, sometimes that means a child doesn't understand or doesn't get it, I guess. And also, if a teacher sees that a child can be quite distracting to other students, it's also, maybe it might be just behaviour, but sometimes it means that the child doesn't get it, so he gets distracted and wants to do other things and might just lose interest in the subject.
There was some occasions when I got really angry that I just walk out the class or something like that. It just came to a point when I just didn't want to do homework because I just felt stupid, and I just looked at the paper, and if I didn't understand question one, I would just put it back in my bag, just go off to my room.
A child with language difficulties might be that child who's very quiet in the classroom, and this could be because the child's struggling to understand, or perhaps is having difficulties explaining and expressing what they want to say.
Really frustrated and really annoyed with myself because I don't really understand, so I just gave up.
As a teacher, you see the child, perhaps with a language difficulty, who nods at you, who looks as though they understand, and then they come back with a piece of work that bears no resemblance to what you've asked them to do. That child could well have an underlying language difficulty. You want to fill in the gaps and you want to understand what they're trying to say, but if you really listen carefully, you can see when they are not quite making sense, when some of their words are mixed up, or when they get words in the wrong order.
Talking. Yeah, it is easy, but people doesn't really understand it. It all gets jumbled up and splats out.
Those children in their writing who often leave off endings for tenses might be those children with some language difficulties. The children who find it difficult to construct longer, more complex sentences using conjunctions, that might be a sign that they have an underlying language problem. Children who appear to get words in the wrong order, not just missing out words, those also might be ones that you would need to consider as having a language impairment.
The kind of grammar difficulties I had was sometimes I mix up words, because originally I would, instead of say taken, I would say tooken, because most people say took, so I added the in at the end because I thought it made more sense.
Examples of the kind of difficulties you might spot is a child saying, I wanted some sweets because I went to the shop, when actually they mean I went to the shop because I wanted some sweets. Or I can buy the toy until the shop opens, rather than I can't buy the toy until the shop opens.
Children with language impairments usually have great difficulty with vocabulary. It might be to do with the subject. So in science, some of the more abstract words, they find it difficult to say them, they find it difficult to remember them, and they find it difficult, definitely, to sometimes pin a meaning to the words.
Sometimes with words, I forget the meaning of a word, but I kind of understand what to do. For example, with a factor, I can't really remember what it means, but I have an idea what you need to do in a maths question for it.
Well, because I didn't do my homework, teachers began to get a bit angry with me, and then it would come to a point when they shout at me, which would make me even more upset, as I'm already a bit depressed as it was. So, yeah, going to school wasn't the best thing.
There are always frustrations for the teacher when a child doesn't seem to be understanding what you have said many, many times, but there is usually a reason for it. It's very important to stop and think that a child wants to do well, is keen to succeed, and therefore that it's something they cannot help, and you might look for an underlying language difficulty.
It's really important that teachers are tuned into these signs of SLI, because once difficulties with language impairment have been identified, with the right support, it can make a big difference to the child's ability to learn in the classroom.
I understand that it might be difficult for teachers to spot, but if they do, it could be really helpful for the student's future and career.